Greetings, this is Griff Ruby with part 62 of my series, Ecclesiology for Sedevacantists, based on the Dogmatic Theology, Volume 2, Christ Church by Msgr G. Van Noort. Pick up the beginning of page 184. Proposition 2. The Roman Catholic Church possesses the mark of unity. Proof. It has unity of doctrine. All Roman Catholics throughout the entire world, ordinary laymen and professional theologians alike, no matter what theological school they belong to, and nowadays even whatever particular traditional Catholic society they belong to, profess the doctrine proposed to them by the Roman Catholic bishops. Even though they may disagree on some minor questions which have not been clarified by the teaching of the Church, they all confess that they are ready to accept immediately whatever decision the Church will hand down on these questions. Again, that's us. So, unfortunately, even trying to understand the present circumstance has to be categorized in that situation. So you do have some various opinions. I mean, what I presented is, I think, quite demonstrably the truth. But it's one thing to have the authoritativeness of a subject matter expert. It's an entirely different matter, of course, for the Church to say, yep, this is what it is. So in the absence of that, we must go with what we know, and what we know is what I've been presenting. 2, it has social unity. All Roman Catholics, traditional Catholics today now, belong to one single society. They worship God with one and the same sacrifice, and they partake of the same sacraments and other spiritual goods, and obey the same universal laws. Now that's kind of interesting. See, even the Novus Ordo doesn't really do that, and of course the others don't either. 3, it has unity of government, for both the laity and the clergy obey the bishops, and all the bishops of the world together with their flocks are under the rule of the Roman pontiff, so that the whole church is indeed like an army drawn up in battle formation. Now again, that's us, even in the absence of a pope, and the difficulties that has entailed, because that absence has been very prolonged. But we're still unified because we're the only ones tied to the papal chair, you see. Everybody else has left it. The Novus Ordoites may have somebody they call a pope, but they're using the word in a different sense. They don't mean it in what as a Catholic means it, a successor of Peter. It's just a noise the man attaches to his name, as he could have called himself Grand Poobah. You don't have to believe him, by the way, in the Novus Ordo religion. But traditional Catholics are tied to the papal chair. We're the only ones who are. We're the only ones who have not separated from the papal chair. And so, once that chair is occupied, we expect a good many rulings and a good many questions. And of course, we will, one and all, submit to those. This unity of the Roman Church, which is not brought about by secret police or terroristic tactics, or by military might, but by the free submission of the faithful, and by the powerful operation of the Holy Spirit, is so obvious a fact that all men acknowledge it, either by their admiration or by their envy. And now, sometimes their envy attempts to destroy it by denying it. But it is a remarkable unity that, wouldn't exist if we weren't all one in the same church. If we traditional Catholics were not all one in the same church, the unity we have among ourselves in terms of all doctrinal matters and liturgical and everything else simply wouldn't exist. Okay. Still, this remarkable unity in no wise destroys the legitimate use of personal liberty, neither by forcing on them a rigid and artificial uniformity. The Church, wise mother that she is, in all matters which do not conflict with God's rights, freely accommodates herself to the varying characteristics of different nations and different ages, granting liberty without license and preserving unity without tyranny. Well, in the absence of much in the way of strong leadership, even our bishops not really fully understanding sometimes the authority, the full degree of authority that has been vested in them, there's no room for tyranny. And yet we stay together. You see, that's the power of the Holy Ghost. Proposition 3. The Roman Church, the traditional church today, possesses the mark of Catholicity. This fact is, in a sense, vindicated by its very name. Other Christian societies are usually designated by names indicating something localized, while the church presided over by the Roman Pontiff is the only society which, by the common consent of the whole world, is called Catholic or universal. Well, that was true then. It isn't always true. We'll comment on that in a moment. Since it is everywhere so called, it is immediately and without ambiguity recognizable. St. Augustine says, there are many things which quite rightly keep me within the Catholic Church. For she possesses the very name Catholic, something which no mere accident when amid so many heresies, that church alone so rightly deserves the name Catholic, that even though the heretics might prefer to have themselves called Catholics, yet when any traveler inquires where he can find the Catholic Church, no heretic would dare to point out his own church or his own meeting place. But many people, certainly every knowledgeable Catholic would point, of course, to a traditional, some place where there's the traditional Mass, at least some rite, usually the Western. You see, we wouldn't point anywhere else. Now, there's a lot of people who would, and some might say, well, isn't that kind of unusual? That has happened before in history. And now I might as well talk about that. When England fell to become the church in England became the Church of England, what also happened was they still called themselves Catholics. They just weren't, they were just now Catholics under the king instead of Catholics under the Pope. And they may not have fully understood the full degree of what it meant to say that being under the king meant not being under the Pope. So with that said, that is why in that place, in 16th century England, is where the phrase Roman Catholic came up. You really never heard it before. You might have one holy Catholic, or one holy Roman Catholic or something like that. You might have a very rare instance where the word Roman might be thrown in along with one holy Catholic and apostolic, but that'd be very rare. But you never simply had Roman Catholic. That phrase, Roman Catholic, I'm a Roman Catholic, this is the Roman Catholic Church. No one had that phrase until 16th century England. And the reason they needed it was because the Anglicans regarded themselves as Catholics. They thought they were. You go to England in 15 whatever, and you say, where's the nearest Catholic church? And they might, in London, they might point you to St. Paul's, which was Anglican. You see, they're not going to point you to some underground secretive place that where a few believers quietly gather with Father Campion to say the true Mass in union with the Pope in Rome. Now maybe if you're savvy and you're knowledgeable in London, you might, you point someone to St. Paul's or some other now, Anglican church in England and say, right, there's the Catholic Church, and you go there and it's not very Catholic because they're already vernacularizing and doing all the same things the Novus Ordo did. You come back to the person and say, I went there, it's not Catholic. I wanted Catholic. Can you give me Catholic like what was always Catholic? And they'd have to dig and say, well, there's this priest who comes into town, and maybe if you talk with some of these other, secretive people here, they might be willing to tell you how to find him and where they might have a Mass. If you can convince them you're not going to take them to jail or something. And that, you see, was the Catholic Church. So to distinguish between Catholic as an Englisher in that time commonly took the term, and Catholic as most of history, they coined the phrase Roman Catholic as distinct from an English Catholic. I'm a Roman Catholic. So the word Roman was introduced. That is extremely analogous to the way traditional is introduced today. We say traditional today because there's other people who are sometimes called Catholics. They shouldn't be, but because of a very similar kind of common error, the expression gets used. So we say we're Catholics. We are what the world would have to say, wow, I mean, you guys really are Catholics. Wow. Exactly, whether they agree with us or not. It's like, you want to see Catholics, look at traditional Catholics. That's Catholic, you see. I mean, even the world knows that now. So with the world already kind of sensing that and knowing that, you see, we still use the word traditional to make it clear. We're Catholics who are united to the throne of Peter. Novus Ordo Catholic, non-Catholic, is united to something that, well, look what they've got, good cartoon they've got in Vatican City today. I mean it, the guy's a cartoon. So, that's why suddenly the Sedevacantists finding gets a little more appeal as people start feeling like, God, how could a pope be such a cartoon? Well, they can't, but there's a whole understanding why. That's what I've been presenting. So it's kind of interesting to see how that goes. So, continuing. As a matter of record, heretics, not only in Augustine days, but its later ages, have constantly tried to snatch the name away from us, referring to us as Papists, Romanists, Ultramontanes, and now Traditionalists, and so on. Strangely, they have always been frustrated in their attempts to pin another label on us. Whether they like it or not, even the heretics and the schismatics, when they are discussing the Catholic Church, not simply among themselves, but with outsiders, always refer to it as the Catholic Church. Unless they did refer to it by that name, no one would understand what they were talking about, since the whole world calls it by that name. As I said, the whole world has this idea of what Catholic is. And what do they picture? They picture us. They picture traditional Catholics. They say, wow, here's someone really pious, praying the rosary all the time, and things like that. That's not Novus Ordo. That's traditional. That's us. You see? So, and that's how they do it. I think it's even happened from time to time where somebody wanted to find a real nun somewhere, and the only place they could do it was some traditional order. So, how truly the Roman Church deserves, the Roman and now traditional Church deserves the name Catholic, becomes quite clear if you stop to consider its vast membership, its geographical diffusion, and its continuous growth. Well, we're going to talk about those things some more in the next part.